Hey guys, welcome back to the ride in a brand new year of lacrosse in 2025. I'm excited to be sitting back here with y'all. It has been a while. It's been about 2 months since the last episode here. I really enjoyed the first 6 episodes of the series. If you want my detailed thoughts on how I thought those episodes went and the feedback there, please go to our Instagram at theride.talk for my thoughts on the matter and where I think the channel can go in 2025. I'm extremely excited to bring you the episode with Chazz Woodson, former MLL All-Star, current Hampton University head coach, and easily one of the best playmakers the sport has ever seen. Now, we recorded this episode in mid-October, but most, if not all, the conversation is evergreen as we dissect just how Chazz became the great player we see in highlights today, including the step-by-step thought process of his signature plays around the crease. He always loved to do fantastic, change of direction, also the dives that he liked to do around that area, some of which you don't even see today. It's like still some of the most innovative things that I've seen around the crease area. So we dive into that. We also dive into his core offensive philosophies and his goals for Hampton University lacrosse program this spring. I'm super excited to be sitting down again with Chazz and get his thoughts. I'm going to have him back, of course, since he is local in this area at Hampton University, and I'm really looking forward to checking out some games this year as well. As always, I hope you find value in this episode and enjoy the ride. All right, Chazz, welcome to the ride, man. Happy to be sitting with you. This episode's going to hit close to home. Really looking forward to talking about Hampton, talking about your history as both a player and now a coach. This is going to be a really fun one for me, man. So hopefully it will be for you as well. How are you doing on this day?
I'm well, man. I appreciate you having me. It's been a busy day. We're obviously in recruiting season, which of course, as you know, never ends. So we've actually got a prospect on campus right now.
Okay.
But he's on a tour, so there's a little time to get away. But we practiced this morning. Hopped on a couple other calls that I needed to be on for the job. Got with the recruit for a little while.
So he's not behind the camera?
He's not behind the camera, hanging out. But it's cool, man. That's the life, right? That's the life of being a coach in, collegiate athletics. And so here we are, man.
Absolutely. You mentioned, now being 18 practices into fall, we're kind of sitting directly in that type of season, right? That off season. How do you think about it as far as structuring your practices through that entire off-season period, and how are you guys doing with that?
Yeah, they're building blocks, right? So we spend some time in August before the school starts, kind of laying out a scope and sequence, right? Like we actually have 3 coaches on staff who all have spent some time in education, and so I always look at it from an educator standpoint, right? We're trying to teach our young men, develop our young men individually and then collectively. So we kind of lay out that full scope and sequence of the fall. Where do we want to be at certain times, and what are the marks and the things that we have to hit in order to be at those points. So 18, 19 practices in right now. I think we are, in some cases, a little bit ahead of where we expected to be, and then other cases we're a little bit behind, which is sort of to be expected. We are super young this year, which is exciting. It's cool. There's some, as a coach, there's some headaches there and some things that,
of course,
you bang your head against the wall a few times for it. But I think that's the balance for us, is finding out how far we can push our guys, knowing that they don't know anything.
Yeah.
That's the nature of it. They're freshmen. They haven't played, I don't know why I want to say one down or one snap, but they haven't stepped on the field, right? They haven't played a Division I game, haven't had a Division I touch or possession, and so they don't know what they don't know. We have to convince them to trust us and trust that what we're trying to get them to accomplish right now is going to help them, 2, 3, 4 months from now, and then of course beyond that over the next 3 to 4 years. But it's been good. It's been good. We've shifted a little bit. Like we're practicing a lot faster than we have been in the last couple years. both in terms of the tempo of practice and then also in terms of the style of play. So that's good, because that's in the big picture, that's where we wanted to go with this thing anyway.
When you look at the history of yourself as a player and then, kind of in those coaching ranks before you got to Hampton, who do you attribute as a coach to a lot of the things that you implement on the day-to-day or on a season? Like, what are those things that you take now being a head coach at a Division I program and say, I pull a lot from this guy?
I hesitate to say because, when things don't work out, I don't want anybody going back to him and blaming him or saying, but no, I think, I was very fortunate to play for some really good coaches over the years. In particular, my high school coaches, I think, were really, really good in terms of, like, not just their understanding of the game, but keeping things in perspective and knowing how different teams work, right? Like, you can have a great program and a great blueprint, but every year is going to be different. Every team is different year to year. And so kind of thinking back through my own process and then, as a high school player, and then also using them as mentors and talking with them, Coach Duquette is a multiple Hall of Fame guy, including the National Hall of Fame. He knows the game. He's been a student of the game for, 40 plus years, almost 50 years probably as a coach. Has recently retired, but retired with 0 losing seasons over 40 plus years. That doesn't happen by chance, right? He knows the game. He understands the game. So I rely on him a lot in terms of both how he taught me, but then also in terms of, like, he watches the game now still. He watches the game. He learns the game. He asks questions about the game. So it's always good to have that kind of outside feedback. And so that's been really good for me. That's the one person that I would kind of throw it back to.
Yeah, folks listening at home, I didn't tell Chazz before the show started. I don't know if you know this, Chazz, but I went to Catholic, the rival.
That's right.
Yeah, went to Catholic. Yes,
I forgot. Yeah.
This is a Norfolk Academy Catholic podcast for the first time ever. But yeah, man, I love Coach Duquette. I love that he still calls the games. You can tell, obviously, the experience and the wealth of knowledge. He knows more about the game in his one pinky than I'll ever hope to know, man. But hopefully he can continue doing that and really giving back to the game. So in your time kind of at Hampton, I'm going to kind of – okay, go ahead.
I actually got to coach one of the Catholic guys this weekend up at an event, which was pretty cool to see.
Oh, really? Do you want to name drop?
I won't name drop.
Okay.
It's going to get me in trouble.
Yeah.
But no, it was just cool to see, right? And, like, just thinking back, right? You're a 757 guy, Catholic guy. And then last year going to the TCIS final and seeing Norfolk Academy and Catholic, right? Like, years back, that never would have been a thing. Right.
Sure.
And to see the growth of the game, see where a Catholic is coming, but they're representative of the growth in the area. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, I love that, man. It's been a journey just building up the Catholic program. Big shout out to all the guys that made that happen. You know yourself, like, it's not a 1 year thing. It's a lot of the guys. Even at Hampton, the first season that you got there, it's a lot about the building blocks to that. So, and I know there was some crossover there too. Some of the guys that I was recruiting were still kind of there playing, man, and they're awesome guys. And so let's kind of, get the spotlight on that. Let's talk about how you first came to the program. I believe it was in 2020.
Correct. In the middle of the world being on fire.
Yeah, that's a challenge in and of itself, let alone the other challenges that you face, right? So kind of take me through that. I would love to hear the story and about those guys, and they've since graduated. Now you got a whole batch of new young guys that you were just talking about. So let's make our way to that discussion, man.
Yeah, we got a whole batch of new guys, a whole batch of stories, a whole batch of a lot of things.
That's the first game. I don't know if you can tell right next to the pumpkin guy, Coach Carter, and that squad when ESPN came. That's fun.
Yeah, man, came into 2020. It certainly was a different time, to say the least. The school and the program have gone through significant changes since then. So we can kind of start with that top down, right? Dr. Harvey, credit to him. Everything that he did to get the program implemented and so forth, and along with Coach Carter. But Dr. Harvey was here 44 years. which is a long time for any president. It's just not a thing anymore. And so there are some conversations that I think are being had, and some things that are taking place across campus that may not have been taking place back at that time, and or weren't taking place at that time, and may or may not have taken place under his leadership, right? And that's not to take any credit away from him. That's just to say, when there's change at the top, you're going to start to see change everywhere. And fortunately for us, that change has been positive. I walked into the program, I think we were 28-ish, something like that, on the roster when I first signed on. And maybe it was like, it might have been a little over 30. I can't remember. But like 21 of those were freshmen.
And that was a big class.
It was a huge class, right? And that was a class Coach DeVoe was bringing in from his short tenure here. So walked into a really small group. But then we had then the year was completely remote. So we spent 2021 at home, and that gave me time. There was good and bad to it, right? Part of it allowed me to spend time recruiting and fundraising, and getting the lay of the land and kind of figuring out how to build. And by the time we got to campus, I think we were 26-ish, 26, 27, somewhere in there. We ended up keeping a handful of walk-ons, and we ended up with a roster of 32 the first year. The second year, we were 46. The third year, last year, we were 42, 43. Like when it all shook out, I think we were 42 or 43 guys. Right now, we have 46 on the roster. So we kind of figured that we needed to get up to 50, especially in the first few years. Now, starting next year, there's going to be a roster cap at 48 across the board in Division I. So that's kind of another interesting dynamic, because right now we have 46, but we only have 6 graduating guys. So we have a roster that conceivably could return 40 guys, and we've already got 14 commits.
Yeah.
And we'll probably pick up another 2 to 3.
Yeah, I'm interested in that recruiting process for you and how that journey's been, man. I remember that first season, and I mean, we walked into University of Richmond to scrimmage them, I think, with 15, 16 guys, man. Like, people wouldn't even recognize some of the stories I would tell them.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, that VMI, the same thing. Like, that first year was a journey. It was an adventure. I'm leaving off a ton of guys, and I would love to shout out a bunch of guys, but that same recruiting class as well that we had, that strong one of guys that were still kind of there when you were there, the Lonnie Jones and Ian Groom and those guys. Like, big shout out to all of them. I'm interested in how you pitched that journey and this adventure of being a Hampton Pirate, right, and going to Hampton University and all that stuff. Now that maybe the 17, like the start of the program, has kind of now been a while past, because that was a big pitch for us at the time, was saying, look, we just started. Now, what is that pitch for you and the program going forward?
So there's a lot there, and the pitch reasonably kind of changes guy to guy. Right, like part of recruiting is understanding what makes your recruits tick, and what they're looking for, and do we have that to offer, right? And do we have something that resonates with them? And it's changed a lot for me since I first got on here, right? Like, one of the things that I think has positively changed around here is we can get questions answered. And when I say that, I mean that comes because there's more staff across the board, not just our program or athletics, but there's more staff on campus that's hired. There are people in key positions that may or may not have been here 4 years ago, 5 years ago. So it's easier to put a picture together to reach out to recruits and say, hey, this is who we are, this is what we're about, as opposed to just trying to sell myself as a coach, or just trying to sell, hey, like, come be a part of something that's really special. Because I do think this is really special. I think this is the most special and most important program in all of college lacrosse right now. I firmly believe that, and that's its own kind of conversation. But like, you can only tell that story so many times, right? Because that doesn't necessarily resonate with everybody the way you think it might. You're also finding guys are a lot more, for lack of a better word, budget conscious, right? Like, everybody wants to get out of school without loans, which is reasonable. It's understandable, right? So that's another kind of piece that we have to navigate. Now, we are significantly better funded now than we were 4 years ago when I got here in terms of the scholarship money and all that stuff. So that helps. But I'll look at like our junior class right now. Our senior class has one, true seniors. We only have one that was actually recruited. He was the lone recruit that I was able to land in that first year while we were in a dead period, right? So everything was me sitting on Zooms and looking at YouTube and texting and calling people that I had never actually seen play, couldn't go out and see play. So we ended up with only one recruit in that class, and then we took some walk-ons on that class as well. Fast forward that same year, actually, our junior class now, there were 2 or 3 of those guys that committed even before he did, right? And those guys were committed to the mission and the vision of the program. Like, they knew this is where they wanted to be, and that's what they wanted to be a part of. So it's a mix, right? You get a mix of guys that really want to be a part of this and really want to be a part of the history and the just the HBCU experience and anything that sets this program apart in terms of it being special. There are guys that resonates with that want to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. Then there's other guys that you really have to sell on the value of the school. I mean, you've been here, you know that, like, the school produces phenomenal graduates, and there are some people doing phenomenal, like, big time things who have graduated from this university. But we have to tell that story, and I don't think collectively Hampton hasn't told that story very well, and we as a program haven't told that story well, or at least not well enough. We're still working on that. Another thing, kind of along those lines, that we have done well over the last 400 something days, a year and some change, is our recruiting visits are structured completely different than they used to be. For a while, in part because of our personnel, and in part because of just the structure of the university and being able to connect with the right people. We were like, our visits were good. Guys came and connected and loved it and felt at home, but they weren't nearly as structured and robust as they are now. So that was one of the things. Last year, when we got here in August with 2 new coaches, right, essentially a brand new staff, we had 0 recruits at the start of school. We landed a class of 20. Yeah. So, and that's a credit to, one, having 2 guys that really know how to recruit, but also having, when our guys come, we have an itinerary that gets them basically from 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's fairly nonstop, but they get everything. They get to go to the Student Success Center and see what kind of help is here. They get to go to the Career Center, find out, what their career options are when they get out of here and what the internship opportunities look like. They get a full campus tour with the admissions department and get to hear from admissions and how that process works. They get to sit with the guys and have lunch and have breakfast and really just kind of get to see what our team is about. They see a lift or a practice or whatever. So the way we structure that, I think, puts a lot of folks at ease because of all the mythology out there about what HBCUs are or are not. All that kind of gets to put to rest, and they get to come here and find out, no, what is it really? Like, who is Hampton? What is Hampton? Who is this team? What are they about? Who are these coaches? What is this team? Like, there's also the perception, if you just look at the scoreboard, mm-hmm. It's like you think we're not doing anything over here. No, we're working, man. It's not easy, right? Like this takes some time to build, and so I think that's been the biggest change. I would say is that the way we run our visits now, folks get to come here and really find out the truth about Hampton University and about Hampton University lacrosse, and then we let the cards fall where they may. If this is not for them, it's not for them. But they get to find out. And that's what I hope for all, the top black players in the country. Come see what we're about, right? See what we're about. Then you can decide, right? But don't turn this opportunity down just because of what you heard from whoever else or just because you looked at the box scores, right? Nothing happens overnight. I heard somebody, I'm kind of getting on my soapbox, but, I was listening to another podcast and they were talking about how Kevin Hart, everybody thinks he just popped out of nowhere, right? Like overnight success. Now you forget, like before you guys knew about him, he was doing this and this and this and this and this, and he was out there working, right? It's going to be the same thing. It's gradually, then suddenly, gradually, then suddenly. So we keep making these gradual adjustments and gradual improvements, and what's going to happen is suddenly it's going to click. And everybody's going to say, man, it was overnight. They just popped up. Nah, man. We've been at this for some years now.
Yeah. And just grinding at it, and real, credit to the coaching staff as well, because I remember when I was recruiting there, when the program first started, we had a lot of tailwinds, right? Like we were able to just say, hey, look, this is brand new. We really didn't have any record on the books to point to and say, hey, we got to explain ourselves, right? Which I'm sure, like you just said, you have to do a little bit of explaining there. So yeah, big credit to the coaching staff. How at the time, and I completely agree with you, by the way, that Hampton is the most important Division I school right now in the country. At the time, that was obviously a huge thing. It was the first HBCU Division I in 40 some odd years since Morgan State. And how much of that do you implement into your culture building, your team building? Is it more once the guys are there, hey, we're a lacrosse team and we're playing lacrosse? How much of it is about the culture of changing the sport and improving the sport and doing all these things, and how much of it is just on lacrosse?
It's a great question. I would say we're trying to change the culture of the program. The culture of the sport and the look of the sport and our impact on the sport will happen, but it will only happen once we start to see some success on the field, right? So what we're trying to change is the culture of the team, how we operate, how we carry ourselves as professionals, how we operate from a business standpoint, how we take care of our books, how we present and represent ourselves on campus, off campus, all of that stuff. We don't spend a lot of time talking about the history and the significance of it once they're here, because they all get it, right? We've spent that time talking to them about it in the recruiting process, and they've heard it all. Now we get to focus on the lacrosse piece of it. If you speak to our guys, and I hope you will, right? Like you have this platform at some point, whether you invite them back or somebody on the team back or me with them, whatever it happens to be. When you speak to them, you realize they have an understanding. They have a very keen understanding of what this is about and why it's special to them. And remember, why it's special to them is not necessarily my big picture of why this is special, right? But them being able to be here around people that look like them, around people that understand them, to go through something off the field or remember something that they went through off the field in their own lacrosse journey, but be able to come here and be around guys who understand it, who can support them through it, and so forth. That's incredibly important, and they get that, right? So that is all wrapped up in this whole HBCU. Like, who cares that it's the first black school with a, HBCU with a Division I program? Like, that's cool, but it's all the things that are wrapped up in that make it cool.
Yeah. So. And also kicking some ass is cool too. You know what I mean? Like, if you guys go out there and you're kicking ass, then I think that message will get across much clearer. You know what I mean? So I'm about it, man. I've followed you, every year that you've taken over the program. It does seem like on the stat sheet and on the score sheet and all that stuff, it's improved every single year. So I'd love to talk about, the 24 season that we're just coming off of, and kind of for the 25 season, how are we going to lock in kind of that first dub, and really just how we want to improve the program, and you specifically.
Sure. Yeah, well, just to be transparent, I think one of the things that we struggled with last year was some collective buy-in, right, and a little bit of ego, and things that, as a successful program at any level in any sport, you have to avoid. Like, you cannot have it impact how you operate on a daily basis. And that starts with me at the top. I own some of that, right? Not so much because I feel like I contributed to it in the sense that, like, my attitude was bad or anything like that, but I think, without getting too deep into the weeds here and sharing, some stuff has to stay in-house. But I think one of the questions that was asked of me by the guys, and I'm a big, like, kind of ground up type of guy, right? Like, I have to lead, but it's also the young men that I'm leading are going to tell me how well I'm leading. Like, my AD can say, "Oh, he's doing a great job." Cool, but, like, if there's no buy-in from the guys, then obviously I'm doing something wrong. So anyway, again, that's another tangent. But I give you that because one of the questions that was asked of me was, like, why did I allow certain people to continue on with us and certain behaviors to continue on with us? And I think part of the reason is I am very big on building relationships that are impactful, right? And I have this unshakable sense that we can help everybody. And that there are guys who, if we can help them, the payback will be huge, right? Like, the return on investment will be worth it.
If you help them reach their potential's so high. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just they're reaching their potential, but it's also, like, in a year or 2 years or 3 months or whatever, this young man is going to leave this campus with a degree and walk out into the world, and I need him to be prepared for this. And I feel like our program is a program that can prepare guys for that, right? Now, they have to want it. They have to want that, right? There's a give and take there. But anyway, I say that because I think part of my fault and part of my flaw last year was I spent so much time trying to help build the individual relationships and the individual pathways that I think I kind of lost sight of the collective. And so I've kind of refocused on that. So the first thing we did was we hired a consultant to work with our staff to figure out, how do we get the most out of our staff? How do we make sure, first of all, three, some would say alpha males. I wouldn't actually say that because I don't consider myself, anyway, right? But three like strong-headed guys, right? And to some degree, stubborn guys, who all are very passionate about what we're doing, both in terms of this program, but also in terms of developing young men. How do we all get on the same page? How do we move forward as a team, and be better than we were last year, right? So we hired a consultant to work with us, who then in turn is now in phase 2 of this, working with us and some of the team leadership. And then in phase 3, we'll work with the whole team, right? Which, as a team with a 46 with 20 freshmen and 2 transfers, that meshing together and that collective understanding and setting kind of the baseline for who we are and how we operate, or resetting maybe, that was a big piece of, how we were going to move forward. I think the collective buy-in right now is phenomenal. I think it's way higher than it has been the last few years. And again, this is not to say anything negative about the guys that we had before.
Of course.
Because I need everybody to also keep in mind when they look at our team, we had last year's fifth year guys. COVID was their freshman year. Last year's seniors, which was a huge class, their senior year of high school was COVID. Their freshman year was essentially COVID because we weren't even on campus. So some of those guys lost 2 years of development, and it was a big class. Then on top of that, you talk about improvements in the program. We had a strength coach who was there 1 year. Then she was gone. Then we had a second year where there was essentially no strength coach, and we were operating it, right? So it's not just the lacrosse piece, but the physical development they weren't getting the way that they needed to, and so forth, right? So it wasn't just, and they had big hopes, that class.
Yeah, I know.
Right? Like, they had big hopes of coming in and really, setting the ship right. And so, I love that class. We came in together, but they had a lot going against them, right? Which makes it very difficult as a young college student, as a 17 to 22-year-old, to say, I want to continue to do this, and I'm going to put in the extra work to be, to get to where we need to be. Because as you know, as any coach knows, any good athlete knows, it's not just doing what's expected, right? That's the baseline. You got to do extra, and you got to do a lot of extra. And in our case, you got to do a lot of extra.
It's a really great way to put it. I know that there are coaches at home that are listening to this, and players that are in unique circumstances where people from the outside look at maybe the way that the scores go, or just the way things are going, and they don't see necessarily all the challenges and hurdles that are insular, right? And so I give you all a bunch of credit, man. The coaching staff stuff I definitely want to get into. I actually met JT at y'all's fall ball game last year. I know he's not the defensive coordinator anymore, but I would love to hear, because I know he's such a great player, right, at the PLL level, especially individually, defensively, and team concepts. I would just love to know what you learned from JT from the defensive side. You probably reins off on him and let him do his thing, but I'd love to hear what he taught you, just because he was on that staff for I believe 2 years.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you phrased the question that way, and I'm going to try to get to what I learned. But kind of what was cool about having JT is that my kind of coaching philosophy is like, I want the best guys I can get, right? So if I'm going to hire you, I'm hiring you with the expectation and understanding that you're one of the best guys that I can get, that you're good at the job, that you're qualified for the job, that you can get the job done. So I'm not going to micromanage you or tell you how to do everything that you need to do. I want to let you cook. That's why you're here. I have to lay out the vision. I have to provide the structure. I have to provide the support. But you're good. You wouldn't be here if you weren't good. It's similar to what you do with your players, right? Like, hopefully, in some cases, some people. That's how I coach. But anyway, that again is another tangent. But with coaches, right? I know you're good. I already know that. So I want you to do it. It was no different with JT. Interesting piece with JT, though, is he's fresh out of college and has never coached.
Yeah.
So
even guys that are that good, it takes a while to get good at that craft.
It really does. But I could see right from the jump, if JT wants to stay in coaching, and he's down in Jacksonville right now, and we catch up every so often. I know he's last time we talked, he said he's getting a little more freedom and a little more of a voice on that staff, and he's liking that. And that's part of, kind of working your way up through coaching, right? I jumped right into the Division I level, but I also spent 11 years as an assistant coach at the high school level. So I understand and when I came out of college, I was it's not about me, but I was an all-Ivy player, right? 2-time all-Ivy player. I was playing at MLL. It was I had a sense of the understanding of the game and all this, but I still didn't have full reign to just come in and do everything I wanted to do, right? Like I was still coaching under a coach who had been coaching 30 years, right? And I learned a lot in that process. Over the 11 years, I was a completely different coach by the time I was 30 whatever than what I was when I was 23, 24. So I say that because it was very clear to me that JT, if he wants to continue along this path, is going to be a really, really good coach. And there's two things. One, he has a very, very keen understanding of the game and understanding of defense, but he also has a tremendous work ethic. Tremendous work ethic and an eye for details. Now, one of the things that he had to learn was to be able to communicate what's in his head to guys who may not understand the game the way he does. Because he was also very good at making adjustments, but sometimes they were so fast and so detailed up here in his head, and it made so much sense to him that like he's giving it to them in real time and their minds are spinning and they're not picking it up the same way. And he like that was a little frustrating for him, I think.
And it can make you play slow on the player side, right? If you're trying to calculate something that doesn't make sense, it makes you play slow.
Exactly. So, I think one thing, maybe this is not what I learned from him directly, but what I learned as a coach was how to coach a coach, or how to start to coach a coach, or help coach a coach, right? But yeah, man, I mean, from a standpoint of just him in general, I started to learn why he was who he was and why he is who he is.
Yeah.
Right. Like his attention to detail, his general work ethic, but is also like his refusal to accept mediocrity, which was also a point of frustration. Like I had to remind him sometimes, like when things weren't going well, it's like, yo, this is why we're here. Right? Like we have to remember this is not like, this isn't the vision, right? The vision is to be better than this, right? The vision is to be winning a conference championship, playing in the NCAA tournament and so forth. But we're not there yet. And the reason we're here is to help get the program there. So you're going to have to deal with some of these frustrations and hiccups and like guys not understanding, guys not being able to execute exactly what you want them to execute. But he has a low tolerance for BS, man.
Yeah.
And it's not just the players, but it's like he's like hyper efficient in the things that he does. And if it's not efficient, he doesn't really want to be a part of it. Which is great to have around, because I'm one of those guys that like I'm very adaptable, and kind of whatever comes my way, I'm like, all right, cool, process it. If this is how it is, this is how we gotta deal with it. And he's like, nah,
we want to break that. Yeah, I want to break that.
Yeah. And so it was a really good balance, I think, for us with that. But I enjoyed working with him, and I do think, nothing against him, but I think we took a step up with his departure and picking up Coach Colbert, and a lot of that is experience. And like Coach Colbert has a phenomenal lacrosse mind and an understanding, particularly of defense and how to coach it and how to adjust and make adjustments on the fly. Like really, really, really good. And so JT kind of laid a great foundation that Coach Colbert was able to come in and, pick up on.
Yeah, I want to talk about the 25 team that's going to be playing this upcoming season, but we just talked about JT, who's a phenomenal player. Yeah. You were obviously a phenomenal player in your heyday, sir. And I just want to know, like, what made you a great player, right? Like, we're not able to sit down and talk to JT, but I'm able to, be sitting here with you with another just great professional, collegiate, all the way down to your high school level when I'm sure you were dominating at Norfolk Academy. Like, what made you great? And let me talk. I just want to hear from Chazz, the player.
Yeah. First of all, thank you. I appreciate that kind of nod. Here's what I would say, man. I'm going to start off on the other side of that equation. I was not as good a player as I could have been. I try not to compare myself to players now because they have so many more touches than I ever had. As a 3-sport athlete, as a guy who grew up in the era where there was no club lacrosse and all that stuff, which I'm grateful for. I would never want to be a part of this. This is terrible in my opinion. But like, I'm not a guy that just put my stick down and never picked it up from, the end of the season to the beginning of the season. That wasn't me. But I was playing football and I was playing basketball, and like, I didn't, I could have put the stick in my left hand a lot more times and I'd be a lot better, right?
Yeah.
I could have stayed extra on a field and been a lot better. I could have, done a little more running here and there and been a lot better. I give you that to say I also worked pretty damn hard, right? That's not to say I just skated by. Like, I worked hard, but I didn't learn until I became a coach. I didn't learn what it means to work to capacity, which is one of the things that I try to pass on to guys, when I get the opportunity to, not just star guys, but when I get the opportunity to speak to young players and, whether they're aspiring high school, college player, whatever, like, learn to work to capacity. That's one of the things I did not do as a young player, and even as a college player, that if I had, I think I would have been significantly better. But I will say, listen, I was a dude that it was 27 degrees outside. I wasn't trying to stick around and get extra shots. I was trying to get back to the locker room, right? So, how does that factor into what I was versus what I could have been? Now, what I do think made me good, I'm not going to gloss over the fact that I was athletic. I think that helped. I had a good stick. I was well coached. Again, I go back to Coach Duquette, Coach Duffy, even the guys I had at Blue Ridge, Coach Canan, Coach Waters. Like, I had good coaches. But one of the biggest things that made me who I was as a player is I wasn't overcoached, and I was allowed to take chances and make mistakes. That's why you see, like, I can catch and throw a ball normally. I can take a normal shot. I can but like, when you watch a highlight, you don't see any of the normal stuff. You see all the crazy stuff. The crazy stuff came because when I was a young player, nobody told me don't do that. I was allowed to try things. I was allowed to screw up and make mistakes. I was just taught that I needed to do it within the context of the team game. And I had to pick and choose my times to do that stuff. And that's what I learned. And some of that I learned to do because it was a function of, like, when I first became a varsity player, I was the smallest guy on the field. I was like, well, I'm not going to run through this guy, but I'm quicker than him and I can get to the doorstep. And I also know if I take off and I get in the air, like, nobody's, like, how do you defend that? Right? So little things like that I kind of did at an early age because it made sense to me, and my coaches allowed me to do it and allowed me to be creative. And then coached me through that, right?
Yeah.
Even as a pro, if I came back to Coach Duke or Coach Duffy, for some film study, or they watched the game, there's, hey, I liked what you did here. You might want to think about blah, blah, blah. Or this is something we've been watching a lot of lacrosse lately, and we've been thinking about this. You might want to consider this, right? So having guys that understood the game at a high level, who coached me at a high level, but also allowed me to develop as a young player and make mistakes was ultimately what contributed to who I became as a player. My junior year, we lost to Boys Latin. We lost to McDonough. The only other game we lost in the state was the state championship game to Stab, who we had beat a week or two before that in the Prep League championship or something like that. I give you that because that year we kept a bunch of freshmen on the team. That was probably the largest roster I was a part of when I was in high school. We had a bunch of freshmen because most teams we blew out, and those guys got a lot of run. There were two players who were really good in that freshman class. That freshman class went on to be like the winningest class across 4 years, one of the most in program history. Mm-hmm. There was one guy that got a lot more run than another guy who was better than him. When I asked Coach why that was, he said, yeah, you're right. He is better, but he takes more chances. He's willing to try some things that the other one's not. And that one that was willing to try all those things and took those chances actually became a really, really good high school player and a really good college player. And so that's always stuck with me, right? Like if you got somebody that can do some things, you gotta let them do those things, right? And then you guide them, but you don't put the clamps on and say, no, that's not what we do.
Yeah, if you're highly skilled but you don't have any influence on that specific game and you're not providing influence into that, competition, it's going to be tough for you to have the coaches kind of trust in prime time. There are players watching this, there are coaches watching this, right? So I've got attackmen, midfielders, offensive players, and also guys who are coaching those players. I'm interested as one of like the most creative players of your time and just a really great player overall. How do you mix the discipline of, needing to do what the team needs from you, but also knowing that you can do something as creative as those jump shots you would take and things like that, those diving plays? Like, how do you coach that now into your players, but also just from your mind in those games, how did you mix the creativity with the discipline?
Well, starting as a player, again, I was coached through it, right? So there were certainly times where I took some inopportune shots or tried to do some things that I probably didn't need to do at the time. But I was coached through it. I was rarely, I shouldn't say never. I was rarely told, don't do that, or stop that, or you're not playing, right? Like that didn't happen. I was very fortunate to have coaches across the board who understood that. Now, some coaches, it took a little longer for them to realize, hey, like, you got something, like he can do some things. But for the most part, once they realized it, they let me do it. Yeah, I kind of learned, like, you got to pick your spots. And I've always been a team player. Like, I've never been, I think and hope that all my coaches and all my teammates would echo this about me. But, like, I've always been a team guy. I've never been out for self. Like, I was never out here trying to, like, oh, let me make sure I get my highlights. It's just not how I rolled. But I understood. And those shots were never about highlights for me. Those shots, there was reason and purpose behind every one of those. So I give you that because as a coach, that's the other piece of it. Is like, if I get a kid that takes a behind the back shot, first thing I'm gonna do is ask him why he took it. Nah, let me be fair. I may tell him that was not the right shot. It's highly possible, right? But there is a time and a place for it. There's a time and a place for a behind the back shot. There's a time and a place for a low to high shot. There's a time and a place for a sidearm shot. There's a time and a place to try to skip the ball and feed it through. There's a time and a place to try to hit the crease, right? Like, there's a time and a place to take chances and to be creative and to do the things that make the game fun, right? Make the game fun to play, make the game fun to watch. There's a time and a place to throw an over the head check. There's a time and a place to, like, it all works. You just have to understand when and why, right? Like, you don't just do it just to do it. So sometimes it's the wrong time and I call them for that. But other times I ask them why they did it. And that's another thing that I learned from Coach Duquette, who learned it from Coach Krzyzewski. I don't do it enough. I'm still learning to do it more. But sometimes you got to ask why. Like, what were you seeing that I didn't see that made you do that? And sometimes you ask them when it was the right time to do it so that they can actually process it. Why did you, like, yeah, that was a great shot. What made you do it like that? What made you take that shot, right? And so the way we balance it is you have to have purpose behind what you do. And you have to do the thing that's right for the team. You still have to make the right lacrosse play. And there are going to be more opportunities to make the right lacrosse play than there are to make the fancy play, the creative play, the extra play, right? And the more great lacrosse plays that we can make around the field, the better off our chances are going to be of winning a game. So that's kind of how I process and how I coach it. I would love to, like, in the perfect world and the vision for this thing, we will be one of the most creative, fun teams to watch play. but we have to get there. And even the most creative, fun teams, if you go back and watch any of those like old Cuse videos or the teams that have really been fast, take the Brown team. That's one of the Brown 2016 team is probably one of the fastest, most creative, most fun teams to watch in recent memory.
The
right?
Lars's team?
Yeah. I mean, I would say between them and the Maryland team from 2-3 years ago or whatever, they were just they were fast. They played the game the right way, and they were very skilled. But if anybody that watches lacrosse closely or coaches lacrosse also recognizes they did all the basics extremely well.
It basically it allowed them to play the game, right? To be able to do that.
Exactly.
I want to get into, again, I want to stay here as you as a player, right? You were one of the best, in my opinion, like Dodgers when it comes to that first move and just the ability to create separation. And so I just want to get to like the finishing that you had as well, right? Everybody knows the highlight, right? Did you call that move the air gate? Like, no, what is it called?
I haven't had a name for it, man. Like everybody, so of course everybody knows the Gary Gate move, right? So that had a name, and then whatever I do, that's what. If it's the one from behind the cage, it's obviously people are going to call it the air gate because it mirrors that. I put my own little twist on it or whatever, but a crossover is a crossover. Air gate is an air gate, I guess. But no, you wouldn't catch me naming anything.
Okay, all right.
Now,
so
if somebody comes up with a name that I really like, I will absolutely refer to it that way.
All right.
I'm not going to be the guy to do it.
Yeah, you can't name. Yeah, I totally get where you're going with that. But so take me through that actual finish, though. Like in your mind as the player, where you obviously that was something that probably had to happen in the moment. You weren't like, I know walking over to this ball, if I'm taking it out of the end line, that I'm going to finish that way. But I just want to know how you thought about it as a player, because obviously no one else was doing it at the time. And so just, take me through, like, how does that someone finish that way? Not many lacrosse players can.
So I can't say what happened the first time I did it in a game, because I don't know. I can remember the first time I sort of did it in a game. And by sort of, I mean, it was sort of a combination of like going from behind like that, but also just a dive. It was actually in LA. I have a clip of it. For whatever reason, that game was filmed. It wasn't a TV game. So there's actually no sound on the video, and it's super far away. So you can't appreciate it. I'll put it that way. Like to me, it was one of the better. Like it should be in the mix with all those other ones you guys see on video highlights. But the video doesn't do it justice. I give you that because that one was completely impromptu. I don't know why I chose to do it at the time. I have no idea. But generally, again, purpose, right? It makes sense. Like almost every other time I've done something like that, whether it was a dive across the crease, whether it was coming from behind, there was purpose to it. And the timing or the angle or whatever made it work. And that's a bunch of mental reps. That's mental reps of like knowing where I need to be and position my body to get the goal. Typically, just being transparent, the times that you think about doing something ahead of time, and when I say ahead of time, I mean like ball's on the other end and you're like, oh, I'm going to do this. It doesn't work out. It's forced, right? Because you can't, part of the beauty of the game is you can't predict everything that's going to happen.
Or the defender.
So,
yep.
Right. Or what the defender's going to do. So sometimes you get in it's no different than a normal dodge, right? Sometimes you split and you're like, all right, my plan is to split here and roll back. But you don't realize you actually left the defender. So now when you roll back, you're actually rolling right back into him because he didn't react or because you made the move too fast. You didn't take what was given to you, right? But in your head, you already had decided this is what I'm going to do. And it actually works against you. it's no different like than trying to dive or, score from behind the goal, whatever it happens to be. It's the same idea. You have to be able to like process things. And that's what great athletes do in general, right? Anybody that plays a sport at a high level is processing a million things like in real time. And that's what it is. So like when it's happening, I'm processing, okay, this is where the slide's coming from. This is where my defender is. This is the angle I get if I take off here. This is the angle I have to get if I miss that mark. And if I miss that mark, I can't do it. I got to pull out and bang the ball ahead or whatever it is, right? So that's probably a really complicated way of saying I process what happens. It's not completely sporadic, but it's never like planned.
It's an unconscious movement. Yeah, I see what you're talking about. Like you don't have to think about the movement itself.
Right. I give you one story though on that. I had been thinking of one goal for a long, long time. And I was like, I'm going to pull it off. I don't know when, but like, I'm going to pull it off. So this is 2007. Mikey and I were both on the Boston Cannons, which at the time I was playing with my dream attack line. It was me, Mike Powell, and John Christmas, which...
Strong line.
First of all, I was the tallest guy, which is weird. And not by much either. So anyway, so we're playing together, and after practice one night, Friday night, he goes, Chazz, I got one. He goes, I got one that's gonna change the game. I was like, this guy's thinking of my goal right now. Like I knew it. I was like, he's thinking of what I've been thinking for years. So we actually sat for a couple minutes and started workshopping this, like just standing around the crease, like how do you do this? What's gonna make it work? I don't know if it was like a next game or a game after.
Well, take me through that convo. If you can remember it, this is the juicy stuff that I'm like, you guys are sitting there on the crease. What is the conversation that's happening? Like, you got to take off here.
The goal is going across the crease. Instead of diving across the crease or coming from behind, it was diving across the back of the crease and scoring from behind. Right? So when we're talking through it, the difference between us was his thought was to dive, let's say if you're at GLE, pipes on your left, right? Goals on your left, coming down GLE, diving across the back and backhanding it like that. Where in my mind, which makes a lot of sense, I guess, in my mind it was the opposite, coming from the other way and shooting it kind of one-handed, right-handed, diving across the back.
So you're diving below GLE across the crease
across the back of the crease
and trying to get it to that right side pipe.
Correct.
Okay.
So, we were talking about it for a few minutes, and I don't think we ever came to a consensus on which direction was the better direction. But a few games later, I don't know if it was the next game or whatever it was. There is definitely a video out there somewhere. He did it. He pulled it off, and he beat me to it. And I had been thinking about this for a long time, but he beat me to it. But the next year, when I got traded out to LA, I was playing with the Riptide. I did it, and I did it the other direction. So we actually both did it the way we were taught. He did it the way he was talking about. I did it the way I was talking about. We both scored it. Two really cool pictures, I think. I'll send you the pictures. I know I have those.
Okay.
But that's creativity, right? So like that's thinking through and taking mental reps of something that may or may not ever happen, but you do them. Like I can't go out and practice. I could, but like it would hurt. Just practice diving over and over and over and over. That's not something I was going to do, right? As many dives as you've seen on these highlights, that's not something I just went and practiced. But I did take a lot of mental reps of it because there's a skill to it. It's not just jumping randomly. It's I have to know where I got to get my body, where I got to get the stick, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, for the high school players at home to take home right now that Chazz was doing that outside of practice. Like a lot of guys think that they can just develop that skill inside of practice. You're talking to Powell like outside of practice basically. So that's huge. It's weird though, because I'm watching the highlights, and one of the ones that stuck out to me wasn't the big, like, jumping behind the cage, all that stuff, who only really a handful of guys can do. The one that stuck out to me was you're going from X, going up kind of the rail, and the guy's like has a hold on your bottom left hand, so you take your left hand off and you finish one-handed, just going away basically. Which to me, I would love for everyone to understand, like, that all these one-handed things are coming back into the game a lot because of some of it had to do, I think, with the Thompsons and some other things. But like, you were doing that stuff more so than anybody that before anybody now is doing it, essentially, man. Like, the one-handed one stuck out to me because it's such a popular thing to do now when you were doing it 15 years ago. I thought that was a really cool finish.
Well, again, thank you. I also have to acknowledge that, like, I wasn't the first one doing those things, right? Like, especially now that everything is on video, now we see a lot more of it, and and I came along at the right time where I was playing in the MLL, and games are being captured and put on TV and all that stuff. But I wasn't the first one to do those things, man. I think, again, what I learned was to be creative at the right times. And to be willing to take some chances, right? Yeah. Like, I could have taken those same shots. Kind of weird thing about, not weird, but like interesting thing about those specific shots, because I know what you're talking about in the video. My first like 5-6 goals are like something crazy about that. Like, there was a large percentage of like my first 10 goals that season were all like one-handed. Like, just weirdly, just by chance. It was probably like 5 out of 7, or like 6 out of 10, something like that. We're all one-handed. But like, if those are saves, then everybody's yelling at me. Like, stop doing that. They just went in, right? So the real takeaway there for me is, like, be willing to try some things. And if they worked, you like figure out why they worked and how you can improve upon it to make it, to bring it into your repertoire so it is something that's efficient and effective. Lyle Thompson coming with that backhand, like, he was good with it and he was efficient with it, right? But I'm certain if he was getting saved all the time, it's not something he would have kept doing. And what it did, he ruined the game, because now everybody takes that shot. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's cool that everybody takes a shot. Don't get me wrong. Right. But there's a million little kids out there doing it that are not scoring.
It's the Steph Curry thing, right?
It's the Steph Curry thing. Right. You still have to learn to be fundamental with it. Lyle, I'm certain, would tell you the same thing I just spent all that time talking about. Like, there was a reason he took those shots when he did. It wasn't just flipping it behind his back. He knew the spot he had to get to. He knew where he had to have his hands, where the defender needed to be for him to be able to get the shot off. It wasn't just coming around the goal and flinging it.
I was talking with Eric Dunn on my most recent podcast, and he was talking about this concept, right, of guys just like, or kids just thinking they can do it. It's like, well, no, Lyle's a 1%er, right? And if you want to do the things that a 1%er is doing, then you have to be able to work like the 1%. And so, yeah, you can,
and you have to be as good or better than the other 99% at the basics.
I love that.
You have to be. Like, and that's, I think, the thing that gets lost is, like, that's why I started with the videos. Like, I did normal things, right? Like, people may think, and also the MLL is professional sports. It's entertainment, right? Like, I didn't get to do all those same things in college. I just didn't. The majority of my goals in college were normal goals. You have to be able to do the and this is what we talk to our guys about. You have to be able to execute the simple things and the ordinary things at an extraordinarily high level.
So I want to stay within kind of the finishing concept and kind of you as a player, because this is definitely what I want, players to be able to say, like, okay, if I want to be able to do those things, how do I kind of start to even attempt that way? But obviously being in the air is something that you did more than a lot of other players.
Sure.
The game has changed slightly. Like they have the goal mouth now, and they have like the area you can't land in. How would you essentially teach that, or how like to players listening now that the game has slightly changed, but you can still kind of land in the crease? Obviously, how should they go about strategically, or I guess technically, diving and doing it well, right? Like what made you great at diving too?
I don't think they should do it. I think it's a move to add to your bag.
Yeah, sure.
When you get to a certain spot on the field, right? Like it's not, you don't want to be the guy that dives. You want to be the guy that can dive when he needs to. So, again, thinking back for me, when I first started playing high school lacrosse, you were able to land in the crease. So that's how I got my start. I didn't have to worry about that. So when they took it away a couple of years later, now it's, okay, I can still dive. I just have to change the angle. I just have to go to a different spot, right? And so that's what it is. The goal mouth thing to me, like I think they should take it out. That's its own conversation. But it's hard to land in the crease and not land in the goal mouth. So you can still dive. You just have to not land in the crease. It's just, but all it does is it changes your angle. It changes your attack angle. It changes your, let me rephrase that. It changes your attack angle from the start, because it's very rare that you're just going to make a move and then take off and dive. It happens from time to time. If you catch a ball, a couple yards off the crease, you can probably make a quick move and get off. But if you're dodging out from the wings, really you got to get to a certain spot. It's going to be a double move. You got to get to a certain spot, draw a slide, and then get back and get to. So there's the initial angle that's going to actually put your defender where you need him to be, put a slide where you need it to be. And then there's the approach angle. If you know you're going to the cage, okay, we got to get to this spot or this spot or this spot around the crease. And now I have to do that in a way that's going to keep me from landing in the crease.
You could tell that you were a great dodger because what you said in there, I don't know if you caught it, but you said put my defender and put the slide guy. Like only guys that are great dodgers can really influence the defenders like you just talked about.
Dodging is not about getting around somebody. Dodging is about getting from point A to point B. That's what it is. So in order to get from point A to point B, sometimes you got to move a couple different pieces.
So everybody knows the obviously highlights that we just kind of went over, and I'm glad we could kind of unpack them a little bit. What were some other type of finishing that you like to do? Like whether that be a rollback, a question mark, or things that you had in your bag that you went to consistently. And kind of when you answer this, I definitely want it to be, again, useful for maybe a player to add now to his game, right? And the game has changed a little bit, but I think these finishes are still prevalent. So interested in your thoughts on like finishing as an attackman or in that area.
I'm going to attack this from a different angle. I'll tell you what I wish I had been better with. I wish I had been a lot better with getting the ball out of my stick. So in tight finishes where you got to catch it and put the ball in the net, one of the things, and you're going to see where I go with this in a second. One of the things I was not great at was doing that efficiently. So I catch a ball and it's like, all right, I got to fake the goalie and then I got to step around and all this stuff, versus really good finishers catch, find the net, put it in, right? Well, one of the things that everybody wants is a giant bag in their stick. Everybody wants hold. Everybody wants to shoot the ball hard. Not everybody's going to be a 90-mile-an-hour shooter. Not everybody's taking shots from 15 yards away where you need that kind of velocity. The majority of the players need sticks that can efficiently get the ball in and out. So one of the things that I learned late in my career was to string my stick simply, because I would play with these bags or these like kind of weird pockets from time to time where it's like if I catch it in tight, I gotta like fake the goalie out of like he's got to jump all the way out in order for me to really put the ball where I want to put it, because like it's stuck in my stick.
Yeah.
I can only put it one place. And maybe that's a little like too into the weeds for some people like think about, but for me, that's what I thought about, because like I finished the ball better as an older player than I did as a younger player. And a lot of that was because I was able to catch the ball, find the net, and just put it there. I didn't have to fake anybody out. I didn't have to think about faking anybody out. And that took me a long, long time to get to, because of how I just had kind of sort of conditioned myself over the years. So stringing a simple stick is one thing. If you're an in tight, close to the crease, inside of 8 yards type of player. And if you look at the great inside finishers, most of them don't have big giant bags. Most of them don't spend a lot of time throwing a bunch of, heavy fakes. Right? One of the best finishers to me is Kevin Lavelle. Like, if I could take Kevin Lavelle's finishing bag, I would trade everything I've done to have his finishing ability. Like all these dives, all that stuff, you can have it back. I might not be coaching here, but you can have it. Maybe I would, because maybe I probably would have been one of the best finishers of all time, right? But like, he's just a guy that knew how to catch, find the net, and when he needed to fake guys, he could, and that's because he had great hands and great wrists and like a great stick. But all right, so give me your question again, because I know I went way off the rails.
No, just. Dude, I love getting into that. Honestly, we're in the same area where I'd love to have you back on maybe a couple months where I can actually go out and take the camera and we could have like a real in-person talk. But my question was specifically around kind of the finishing and stuff that other finishes that you would love to maybe even have your attackmen have in their bag, right? Maybe it was something you did well, maybe it isn't, but just something that you're teaching your attackmen to kind of, hey, we need to have this kind of down.
Yep. Guys need to be able to turn the corner. One of the things I did not do well is just turn the corner and finish. Now, I have also learned that some guys are just better at it than others. Doesn't mean you can't work on it. But I watched a lot of guys that, push up the hash marks and just turn the corner and stick it. And I'm like, how did you put that ball right there? Because I've tried that a million times and it didn't happen. So there are some guys so we actually do some work on that, right? Like we do a little bit of work with just coming up the hash marks, getting your hips through, getting your shoulders through, and being able to shoot that ball. And again, a lot of that is technique, right? Like there's just certain things that I could have spent more time working on, that I didn't. So that's one. Also the ability to get the ball, again, it goes right back to what I was just talking about. I was talking about inside, but also being able to catch at 10 to 12 and not have to wind up, right? Mm-hmm. A guy that I coached basketball with, who was a phenomenal basketball mind and player development guy. I won't name drop him right now, but really, really high level type of basketball mind. Some of his development work, he does like this catch high, shoot high drill, right? So like, instead of having to catch it, bring the ball back down, and go up and shoot. It's like, if you catch it from here, shoot it from here. If you catch it up here, you're shooting it from here, right? And he has the mechanics and everything that lead into that allow you to be able to do it. So one of the things that when I do some shooting work with our guys, we talk about being able to get the ball out from wherever you catch it, right? If you catch it low, you got to be able to shoot it. Not necessarily shoot it low, right? But shoot from that angle. If you catch it up here, you got to be able to keep it up here and let it go. I think too many guys right now, at least too many of the guys that I have on my team and for my liking and guys that I've coached in the past, they catch it and it's got to be this big, big wind up and they got to take 2 or 3 steps. No, I need you to just catch it and let it go. Some of that is the way you have your stick strung. And then some of it is taking a lot of reps and knowing how to shoot the ball quickly and efficiently.
All right, so we're about at an hour and 10 minutes, so we definitely want to wrap up here soon. So these have to be lightning answers. No, dude, I appreciate it.
2 podcasts worth.
I know you're a busy man, so I don't want to keep you too long, but we can be here as long as you want. But But these will be generally lightning questions, but I want to dive deep into them. Obviously, just like
Okay.
let's keep that in mind. What's it going to take to win that first game, right? Like where in these games that you guys have been close to picking up a W, where is the team falling short when it comes to just, is it offense? Is it face-offs? Is it clearing?
It's everything.
Is it everything?
No.
It's everything.
So it's everything, but they can be pinpointed. One, winning is difficult. Winning is absolutely difficult. It doesn't matter where you are. So you have to have some kind of strategy that gets you goals that are easier to score than 6-on-6. So we have to score in transition, but we have to create transition opportunities. So that's one of the things that we haven't done well enough is create those transition opportunities for ourselves. And then when we get it down there, you have to have guys that know how to push and take some chances and be willing to play that way. So that's one thing. We play entirely too much defense, which kind of comes back to what I was saying. Like you have to have guys down there that can handle the ball and finish and make decisions quickly and all that good stuff, right? But if you have guys that are constantly turning the ball over, you're going to play too much defense. You're going to be extremely exhausted and you're going to make mistakes. Defense is going to make some mistakes throughout the game anyway. You can't pile it on and put them in a position where too many mistakes is inevitable. Mm-hmm. We also have to win faceoffs. We have not, over the last few years, we've been terrible at the X. We have to be better. We're working at that. But that's a point of emphasis for us. So I think those are three areas in particular for me that we have to be better with. And then we have to get to, in the 6-on-6, we have to get more shots off. I think we showed last year that we handle the ball a lot better, but the number of shots we created throughout the course of a game was still entirely too low. Right, so
it would be like 20. I remember looking at the box score, being like, "Damn, they only took 18 shots. Like, it's tough to score. It's tough to win."
It's a race to 40. Like, you got to get at least 40 shots off. You have to. So, we're intentionally trying to play faster, but you also got to, if you don't take care of the ball, you're not going to get those shots. So,
okay, yeah, team concepts. We talked a lot about individual coaching, individual player skills, and things like this. From an offensive perspective, what do you like as a coach? What are you instilling in fall and in this in-season, all this stuff, from an offensive concept perspective?
Forward. The ball's got to move, and the ball's got to move forward. Some guys spend entirely too long with the ball in their sticks, and then other guys insist, for some reason, on throwing the home run ball or trying to feed the crease or, stopping and trying to throw back when all we got to do is throw the ball forward. So we're trying to be very intentional about changing fields, north, south, and east, west, and making sure that off the dodge, the ball does change fields. So you're getting at least 2 passes and getting it out the backside. I mean, if you watch, I'd be willing to bet $1, only $1, but I'd be willing to bet $1 if you went back and watched all of the goals scored across the NCAA in 6-on-6 sets. At least 60% of them are scored off of 2 passes, like a dodge, 2 passes, and then there's a goal. So, but that only happens when you're willing to let the ball go. You got to throw the ball forward, and you got to have guys that are willing to be move-it guys. You're gonna pass the ball significantly more than you're gonna shoot the ball. You have to understand it, accept it, and be willing to do it.
Now, I want to preface this question here, and I want to make sure that the guys understand this is not a diss by any means, right? I went out to the CNU game I believe last fall, and there was in CNU would be a great Division I team, like or at least a good one. They would beat some teams. The size difference even there was a little bit noticeable, and so you're saying, okay, CNU looks a little bit bigger. How do you have to coach around that? Division I, if you're talking about the higher end Division I, it's like a full-on football team. Don't even talk about Virginia that's running 6-7 dudes out there. How do you coach the game, and how does the concept change when you do have that size difference? I'm sure when you're going and facing teams that you guys have to face.
You have to play faster. I'm firmly set on that. right? Because in a 6-on-6, it's hard enough to score. It's significantly harder when you're outsized and outstrengthed, right? When a defensive group is bigger and stronger than you, or bigger and stronger than your offensive group, it's very difficult to score 6-on-6. So we have to create transition opportunities. We have to play faster. We have to be willing to take some chances that other teams might not take in transition, right? Like we may not have 6 guys on the field, but we still may need to go to the goal. And you got to be willing to kind of live and die with that. Like that's going to create some problems. That's going to mean you got some guys that are you're going to play more possessions defensively than you might want to, right? And that's off the top. That's without turning, like that's without the normal
playing
turn.
perfect. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, but I think you have to play faster to create opportunities for yourselves. The other thing I think is we are very conscious about trying to create more two-way midfielders, guys that can stay on, so that we can take advantage of maybe there's a big 6'2", 190-pound offensive midfielder, but if he can't stay on and play defense, right? Like we're trying to take our chances with some of that and say, yeah, you may be good offensively, but if you can't play defense, we're going to toast you. I don't care how big you are or how small we may be. We're going to try to take advantage of that. We have to recruit bigger. So you're talking about in season, but big picture, we are bigger this year than we were last year. And we will be bigger next year than we are this year, and we have to continue that.
Just a quick anecdote. Who's going to be a pretty good two-way guy for you, although it's going to take him time to develop just like anybody else. I went to go to an NSA football game recently just to watch Catholic, and little did I know that Howard Casterlow, one of your new recruits, yeah, man, he looked great, and he looked way bigger than I've ever seen him. And he had like 2 pick sixes, an 80-yard touchdown. I mean, he looked good, man. So hopefully he can slot in there.
Yeah, I saw the highlights. Every time I see him, he gets a little bigger.
I know.
So I'm excited about it. They actually play NA tonight. I have some commitments on campus. Otherwise, I'd be at the game. But yeah, I agree with you. I think he's going to be one, and like you said, it may take a year or so to develop and do some learning. But he fits the mold of where we're trying to go.
I love it, man. Also, the local area too, getting some love as well. There's some solid players here, man, and I want to develop the area of ton, and hopefully we can do that. Overtime questions. Honestly, we didn't get to half the stuff I wanted to ask, so we're gonna have you back on, man. But we're over my 2 overtime questions. So from an offensive perspective, right, you're down by 1, 30 seconds left. What are you saying to your guys in that timeout? And kind of conceptually, what are you kind of scheming up on the board?
Let's start with the scheme. We probably want to draw, for us, I'm not going to give you our specific plays, but we probably want to come from behind, given our personnel, and probably looking for some kind of misdirection. So in other words, we're trying to push one way, draw slides, but make sure the ball goes back the other way. That sets up shooters coming either across the top or creates green space on the other side for our attackmen to push that.
There's a whole, my mind just instantly connected the two when you just talked about misdirection, because what you've seen in the NFL right now is they're doing more rugby plays. I don't know if you've seen that, where they're pitching the ball more. Do you see that, where they're doing like hook and ladders?
Yep.
And more teams are doing that. I think there's something to that, man. Like there is something to maybe, flowing one way and having some way to have the ball be easily directed back the other way and the defense be offset on that.
Yeah. I've got a concept and a play. It's a continuity offense that that you can actually just kind of strip away parts of it and just run set plays. That I really like. I don't know if we'll get to the continuity piece of it this year, but it's one of those where in line 30 seconds type of deal. Like we can run it from up top or behind. But to your point, I think when you start looking at other sports, there are things that you can pick and take away.
Yeah, Eric Dunn answered this question, or Yeah, I believe it was him. We're talking about offense, and he was talking about from the flip way perspective, right? Defensively. So he was having a short stick on the guy to start because he knew he was going to slide. I'm interested from the offensive perspective. Who are you having start with the ball, and is that the person that's going to start it, or are you trying to, cycle it around and stuff like that? Who do you want dodging in that moment?
It's a good question. I don't have an answer for. The immediate instinctual answer is we want to dodge the short, but to your point and sort of the end goal there is we want to. It's probably not the first dodge that's going to score the goal, right? So we want to end up dodging a short on the backside. So, yeah, where you start with it versus what do you have at the beginning? I think ideally you still want to dodge the short to start, just because you don't want to pull up there wreaking havoc and kind of screwing up your play. But I think we do have a couple guys that can handle a pull, especially if they're not going to be the guy that we're really trying to option.
Okay.
So that's kind of where I would go with it. What I'm telling them though is pretty simple, man. Like, we worked our ass off to be in this spot. This is the type of game that you dream about and that you want to win. All we need to do is execute, right? So whether we score or not doesn't matter. But if we don't execute, there's no chance of winning, right? Like, if you execute and we get a great shot and they save it, or we miss the cage, so be it, right? We've put ourselves in a position to be successful, but we have to execute. Means nothing if you've done all this work and then in the most critical time you don't execute.
All right, great answer, man. And honestly, this has been a great podcast. Guys, I've been sitting with Chazz Woodson talking lacrosse here, talking shop, talking about Hampton University. He is the head coach at Hampton, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys' season, man. I'll have you on before the 2025 season, of course. I would love to talk to some players as well. But, yeah, man, one of the best players, honestly, one of the best Dodgers that the game has seen, and it's just been an honor having you.
I appreciate you, man. This is awesome. Thank you.